They called Republican strategist Karl Rove George Bush's brain. He's on Fox, which we know Trump watches, to deliver this GOP warning.
With the president's approval rating where it is and with the normal malaise that we have, it's hard to believe that the Republican losses are only going to be 5 or 6 seats.
And 5 or 6 seats would be enough to lose the House. Malaise is usually associated in political history with Jimmy Carter and his one-term presidency. Rove also talked about the polling. There's new Financial Times numbers that show majority of voters disapprove of Trump on the economy. His negative ratings outweigh the positive. That's underwater. Negative 16 on jobs and the economy, even worse on inflation and tariffs, as you see here. Then there's consumer sentiment. That's not just one of these political polling things. Economists look at that data for the long-term heartbeat of the American economic mood. It's at a new low. One Trump official struggling to keep up.
President Trump has sort of taken every problem on earth and got 100% at fixing it. And I think that can be stressful for people to see so much change going on.
Yes, that 100% success is causing stress, which is why everyone's mad at the economy and Trump. Word salad. Trump looks out of touch with all the vanity projects while people suffer. Gas prices over $4.50. Diehard Trump supporters have put a golden statue of Trump at a Florida golf course, which might fit their mood, but they're in the distinct minority. It was funded by crypto investors who commissioned Trump's likeness in a promotional push. Guess what? For their meme coin, because that's how they want to get rich. Not very relevant to most people if you're not in that elite, smug, rich, right-wing circle that is continuing to benefit from the Trump wheeling and dealing. As for the cost estimates for that reflecting pool at the Lincoln Memorial, well, they're running over budget, $13 million of taxpayer money. The ballroom at $1 billion. Democrats vowing to fight it. And we haven't even gotten to the missing gold phones.
Hey, Trump supporter here. This goes out to Don Jr. and Eric. Where the is my phones? I ordered 4 gold Trump phones in the summer. Now we can't get any updates on them.
He's not alone. A bunch of customers and MAGA fans are very angry to find that Donald Trump is breaking his word again. The Trump's family business has duped whatever fans it has left. This latest grift involves the Trump family's business failure to deliver promised Trump phones after getting down payments on them from a lot of customers. Now, how many people would actually like to buy a Trump gold phone at this juncture, say in the last year? Well, considering the past ripoffs and the fact that no major cell phones are actually produced in the U.S., so this seemed like a long shot, well, you might think not that many. But the answer is well over 500,000 people each paid a $100 deposit to get in on the planned and promised Trump phone. Not a single confirmed customer, though, has gotten one. This is a report from the IBT. Meanwhile, the website for the so-called Trump Mobile, which isn't very mobile, includes a disclaimer. A pre-order doesn't guarantee a device will be produced or made available for purchase. I mean, that is just out there. A pre-order means not a pre-order. We just hold your $100 and we might never make the phone. The so-called Trump phone was announced with a lot of fanfare by Trump's sons last year.
Today, we're here to introduce Trump Mobile, making phones in America. It's about time we bring products back to our great country.
We're going to be having call centers for Trump Mobile in St. Louis, so we're keeping our data onshore.
We plan to build phones in America. All of our customer support is in America. A lot of people are getting ripped off, to say the least, because they don't pay attention to our cell phone plans. So I think we can do it better.
People are getting ripped off. They're going to do a better job. They're actually doing no job because they haven't shipped any phones. The company's selling point was that this somewhat gilded device would be made in America. You heard that in some of those clips. Now they say it will be proudly American. I guess that's kind of how the phone identifies. It will be designed with American values in mind. Sure. Whatever. But that's not how country of origin labeling works. If you're going to make something here or have it abroad, the mother of all tariffs president ought to know that. The phone reportedly now predominantly made in China. But again, that's if it's made. So far, the company now says, don't assume if you buy one or part of one that it'll ever be produced. So we don't know if it's ever going to be made or where. Now, if it's all familiar, this is not the first time Trump has done this kind of thing. Remember, there's a Trump-branded crypto meme coin. The family has made over $200 million on it, but its value has tanked by over 90%. That means, obviously, if you put in $10, you'd have about one left while they get rich. Trump has basically been moving through different groups of ultimately disillusioned consumers for decades. You could analogize some of what he does in business to how he's moved through voters, something we've explored in past reports, because he keeps moving around, moving the goalposts, finding new people to believe the thing. The old people are disillusioned. We all know how many folks have worked for him and then turned on him. In business, he licenses a brand, but then is not effective and sometimes just not honest about executing the so-called brand deal. And that's left products varying in quality or in whether they exist. Remember, it was a Trump university that later actually cost Trump tens of millions of dollars because so many people had been legally defrauded that they had a court case. Unlike the revenge prosecutions we've been telling you about, they had a case that over the years they finally won. He did return some money, but this is a pattern.
When it comes to great stakes, I've just raised the stakes.
My new game is Trump, the game.
The God Bless the USA Bible. At Trump University, we teach success. That's what it's all about.
It's a smooth vodka. It's a great tasting vodka.
The elegance of Trump Vineyard Estates, it just can't be beat.
We were the first plane out this morning. We were the most successful flight this morning. We had more people than anybody else, and I think we had better service than anybody else.
A lot of branding and a lot of failures. To paraphrase the great poet Mos Def, I don't care what kind of brand you are. I care what kind of man you are, what your principles and standards are. With that in mind, we bring back the aforementioned Brian Tyler Cohen, host of the online show No Lie, many YouTube subscribers, recent interview with Obama. And we were asking you about the Trump economy, and this business failure fits into a pattern. Your thoughts tonight?
It does. And you know, the interesting thing about all of this is when I was growing up, it would have been impossible, really, to imagine that any young person would really be a Republican. But Trump took advantage of the disillusionment that so many young people felt. And it was a really amazing opportunity for him and Republicans to do what they haven't done for my entire lifetime, which is to really exploit a lot of that pain. And instead, Trump gets into office. He has this rare opportunity to deliver for a disillusioned generation of young people, whether it's millennials like myself or Gen Z. And instead, he just decides to grift and con them. And whereas he said prices would go down, he started a trade war that sent the price of everything surging. He cut everybody's health care, cut everybody's food assistance, and instead started delivering for himself. I mean, you were just covering most of this stuff: a reflecting pool and a ballroom and a Qatari jet, a rose garden, a golden statue of himself. He's doubled his net worth. I mean, if there's anybody who still doubts the fact that Trump, you know, ran on one thing and has delivered something completely different, this should put all of that to rest.
And do you detect something different happening out in the response to the gas crisis and the war, as opposed to other so-called Trump betrayals?
Yeah, I think those are especially interesting because these are issues that Republicans exploited specifically, whether it was with regard to Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. I mean, they ran on this idea that you need Trump back because your gas prices are only going to be low if Donald Trump is in office. You need Trump back because the only way that your kids avoid a draft is if Donald J. Trump is in office. And yet here we are with Trump in office. He's got full control of government, so there's not even any Democrats to blame. You can't point your finger at any Democrats. And gas prices are the highest that they've been in years, nearly at the highest price they've ever been. And now we have a war that's been raging on in the Middle East for 2 months that's costing God knows how much money every single day. And that would be bad enough unto itself. And it's made even worse given the fact that this is something he campaigned expressly on not doing, and even worse on top of that, over the fact that all of that money could have gone to America First priorities, which is what Trump himself ran on. It could have helped people in this country with healthcare and food assistance and making education better funded or infrastructure. I mean, you name it.
And then I was curious, your counterparts on the digital right, why do some of them seem either more flexible, or others would say more transactional, than the old school Republican pundits in D.C., some of who we see on Fox? You've got your counterparts have moved more quickly against Trump lately on Epstein and the war.
Look, I think that in large part these folks are younger, and I don't think that they showed any allegiance to Trump or the Republican Party. I mean, these aren't lifers, right? These are not people who have been lifelong Republicans. Like I said, I mean, when I was younger, if a lot of these folks were, a lot of these folks were supportive of Barack Obama, and we've kind of felt this sense of, okay, well, Democrats aren't delivering where they have control, and so I'll just be a little bit more flexible, give my vote to Republicans, and see if they can deliver. So these aren't people necessarily who have long-term allegiances, and frankly, I think that the way that Trump has kind of undermined his own promises to these people is so egregious. Like, there is no way for any of these right-wing influencers to justify or defend Trump engaging in a foreign war when he ran on no new wars, cutting health care when he promised to protect health care, starting a trade war when he promised to bring costs down, and instead focusing all of these costs on himself and building himself a ballroom, hosting crypto dinners for himself. I mean, this stuff is so aggressively impossible to defend that, of course, these right-wing influencers, recognizing that Trump's not going to be around forever, they're skating to where the puck is going, not where it is right now, because they want they want a half-life longer than when Trump is in office, and that's only going to be another couple years.
Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. What Donald Trump wants, he usually posts about on Truth Social at odd hours. From his demands that states gerrymander their congressional maps to keep him in office, to compelling his Justice Department to prosecute his political enemies, now amid flashing red warning signs that his party will lose the midterm elections by large margins due to both historical trends and his soaring unpopularity. Donald Trump is demanding an election army. Over the weekend, Donald Trump lashed out at an election integrity effort launched by Democrats, posting this on Truth Social, quote, "During my historic election in 2024, the Republicans had an election integrity army in every single state to preserve the sanctity of each legal vote. We will be doing the same again in 26, but it will be much bigger and stronger." While that sort of brutish, detailless claim would normally prompt an eye roll, it does come amid other stuff. An alarming effort by Donald Trump and his backers to centralize control of our elections into the hands of the federal government, with Trump allies calling for ICE at polling places in November. Take a look.
Like, why is there objection to sending ICE officers to polling places? Illegals can't vote. It doesn't make any sense.
We can use what's happening with these ICE helping out at the airports. We can use this as a test run, as a test case to really perfect ICE's involvement in the 2026 midterm elections.
We should point out to Todd Blanche that the argument cuts both ways, right? People here illegally can't, and based on the Trump administration's own investigation, don't vote. So why would you, Todd Blanche, send them there? But it also comes as Todd Blanche's department, as well as Donald Trump's allies in state houses all across our country, are working overtime to undermine the authorities of states to conduct their own elections. As Trump's Justice Department weaponizes the big lie to get a hold of election data in key swing states like Arizona and Georgia. Republicans in red states are rushing to redraw their congressional maps after Donald Trump demanded they do so. They're also doing that after his handpicked justices in the Supreme Court participated in the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, with Tennessee, Alabama, and South Carolina all making efforts to eliminate majority black, majority Democratic districts in just the last week. And if you're looking for the why are they doing all this? Look no further than the polls, which increasingly show Donald Trump's party losing the 2026 midterms. The Economist forecasting model gives Democrats a 19 in 20 chance of taking back the House. Donald Trump's full court press to keep his party in power by any means necessary, whether voters like it or want it or not, is where we start today. The former lead investigator for the January 6th Select Committee, Tim Heaphy, is back with us. He's now a partner at Heaphy, Smith, Harbach, and Wyndham. Also joining us, Protect Democracy Executive Director Ian Bassin is back. And with me at the table, NYU law professor, legal analyst Melissa Murray is here. Tim Heaphy, they tried this in 2020. They came up short because of the actions of a handful of people. No one investigated those crimes more thoroughly than you. Tell us what they tried before, what stopped them, and where those guardrails no longer exist.
Yeah, Nicole, you started the piece here by talking about the why, right? Their why is that there's widespread election fraud, that lots of people around this country, illegal aliens or people out of the proper precinct trying to vote. That's just false. The president has been saying this repeatedly for years, and it just isn't true. There's this myth of widespread voter fraud that is the purported justification for an election integrity unit or other steps. In 2020, right, his argument again, which he continues to repeat, was that the results in that election were infected with widespread fraud, ineligible voters voting, dead voters, miscounting, intentional voter fraud. And again, Nicole, there's never been any factual basis for that. So all he is doing now, I think, as you correctly defined the why, is coming up with a sort of precedential argument as to why he will lose. It's to argue, even in advance of the election, that there's going to be fraud. That's why we're taking all these steps. Because he knows that what's likely to happen based on historical trends in the polls is that he's not going to do well this time. But we got to just, every time we talk about this, I feel like we just have to come back to the baseline fact of the myth of voter fraud in this country. We do this well. States are really good at it. We have integrity in our voting systems across the country. And it's just false to suggest otherwise to the American people.
I mean, Tim, I guess the pushback, though, is that, you guys had his backers who believed the lies. And so I think on Earth One, actually, even dangerously close to Earth Two, the second Trump administration investigated through its Department of Homeland Security this matter of whether people here illegally vote, and they found that they do not. So even if you want to use their own numbers, this is a solution. ICE agents at the polls is a solution in search of a problem, but I wonder if we're asking about the wrong problem. I mean, it's obviously there to intimidate and threaten, and what do you do about that?
100%, Nicole, you're exactly right. It reveals the why, because again, the why is not voter fraud or protection of integrity of the ballot. The why is to intimidate people. It's to get people to stay home. It's to shrink the map or shrink the number of people voting to try to maximize the chances of his political success, right? Again, if there's nothing to protect, there's no fraud to prevent, then it's revealed what the purpose is. I'm much more troubled, Nicole, by the prospect of ICE agents or police officers or even National Guard or military near our polling places. Historically, we have had political polling places that have been independent of military law enforcement intervention. That's because we don't want them to be intimidating. We want people to freely come and exercise the franchise, their right to vote. So I'm more troubled by the presence of law enforcement officers than I am by lawyers standing back behind the tables in some election. Both parties have done that for years. I've done that on the Democratic side, been an election integrity monitor. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there are rules about what they can or can't say or do or come within a certain number of feet from the actual polling place. It's the presence of the uniformed military and law enforcement, Nicole, that's much more intimidating and has the potential to suppress the valid exercise of the franchise.
In Bassin, the sort of elephant in the room is that the two stories hang together with what is clearly an attack on minority voting rights in America. I mean, ICE agents aren't there looking for me. They're there looking for people who they think they can make feel afraid, that they'll either be asked to produce can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but documents to prove that they're citizens or follow them home to attack someone that they think may live in a mixed status house or harass them or create some sort of vigilante system where people who vote are then investigated to make sure they have that status. And it comes at the same time that the Supreme Court struck down the Voting Rights Act. Do you think we are I like to always sort of get your big brain thinking about the pushback. I mean, are we sort of back at a time, a chapter of history where it will become the mission of everyone who wants to remain a democracy to go down and make sure that people have the right to vote and they're not harassed?
The answer to that absolutely is yes. I mean, we are witnessing an attack on voting rights, and particularly the voting rights of Black communities and communities of color, at a level that we really haven't seen since sort of Jim Crow in the South, and we need to respond to it. And there's going to be a mass day of action this Saturday, May 16th, across the country, but centered in Selma and Montgomery, Alabama, honoring the sacrifices made by the civil rights generation. And everybody who's watching this now should go to allroadsleadtothesouth.com and register to participate this Saturday, because it is now our generation's time to carry the mantle forward of civil rights and voting rights in this country to make sure that we remain a democracy. That's going to take work by all of us, but the good news is we are going to succeed at this, right? Donald Trump has been president during one other midterm election in his life, and that was in 2018. And in 2018, the Democrats flipped 40 seats in the House of Representatives at a time when Donald Trump was more popular than he is today. They cannot gerrymander their way out of a 40-seat shellacking, and he's less popular today than he was in 2018. So they are going to try to gerrymander their way out of it because they are otherwise losing unpopular, and they're going to try to rig the rules. But here's the thing. Our founders, in their inimitable wisdom, made it so the president doesn't control the rules of elections. And for the president to try to rig the midterm elections, he is going to need accomplices up and down our federal system, at the state level, at the local level, in the Congress and the courts. And in order to get those accomplices, he needs to show that he's politically powerful. And the fact of the matter is, he is not. We have reached the point in the story where the Trumpist political project is in its death spiral. And I have talked to Republican leaders who are in the sort of non-hardcore Trump, but soft Republicans supporting of the Trump administration camp, and they know it. They know that the Trumpist political project is over. And that means he is not going to be able to do what he needs to do to complete his authoritarian consolidation. And if we do our part, we are not just going to save our democracy, but we're going to have an opportunity to really reform it and rebuild it to be fit for purpose for the 21st century.
My head wants to nod along with everything you said, but my gut still feels scarred by the news events of last week. Just speak a little bit about how the sort of shock and awe of the Virginia decision and the Supreme Court decision rippled through MAGA as maybe, I don't know, a last hurrah. I mean, I know, I guess, intellectually that everything you're saying about the movement being at about 28 to 30% is true. But it does feel like this branch of government that we've looked to over the last 15 months for its steadfast rejection of Donald Trump's lawlessness has just handed him two massive victories on the voting rights side.
Yeah, well, first off, it's important to recognize that the current iteration of the United States Supreme Court has been against voting rights and racial justice since the beginning of this Federalist Society conservative ascendancy took over the court. So this is not a Trumpist project. This is a project that those 6 members of the Supreme Court have been at for their entire careers since John Roberts was a young lawyer in the executive branch. And at the end of the day, they are going to probably help Republicans in a handful of seats across the country through a really disgusting allowance of racial gerrymandering across the South. But it is basically going to give the Republicans a handful of seats in which they are better positioned than they would have been before both the Virginia decision and the U.S. Supreme Court decision.
The excellent Wired magazine just recently did a rundown on how things are going specifically at the Justice Department's voting rights section. Used to be kind of the crown jewel of the Justice Department in terms of excellent lawyers and excellent lawyering. Right now, quote, mistakes in the office happen constantly. In a May letter sent to the Colorado Secretary of State, the DOJ requested access to records pertaining to the November 2000 federal election, when they likely meant the 2020 federal election. In August, DOJ sent a letter to the New Hampshire Secretary of State seeking voter records which cited the wrong provision of the Help America Vote Act. In January, lawyers at Trump's DOJ filed a lawsuit in the wrong federal court in Georgia, and the judge therefore dismissed the action. In February, the same agency filed a lawsuit seeking New Jersey's voter rolls. In that lawsuit, they misspelled Governor Mikey Sherrill's last name 5 out of the 8 times she was mentioned in their lawsuit. In March, it was revealed that lawyers at Trump's DOJ had spent months emailing the wrong address while seeking information on Oklahoma voter rolls. Also in March, a judge in Washington state demanded to know why DOJ voting section lawyers had improperly served their lawsuit and missed a crucial deadline. The judge also questioned whether the lawsuit was served in a different way than had been outlined to the court by DOJ. And if so, why DOJ's lawyers had made, quote, inaccurate representations to the court. In another filing in late February, DOJ lawyers seeking sensitive voting data in a single filing misspelled the words voters, emergency, and United States. United States, I mean, how's it going overall with Trump lawyers' efforts to nationalize the midterm elections and have Trump take over elections all over the country? Quote, the Justice Department has not secured a single court victory in the 30 lawsuits it has filed to try to force states to turn over sensitive personal data on voters. The Washington Post reports now that in the crucial Eastern District of Virginia, which handles a ton of national security cases, Trump's genius effort to bring a Banana Republic criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey, you know, the seashells thing, that has resulted in that office losing. EDVA has lost its U.S. attorney. They've also lost the head of the criminal division there. They've also lost the head of their national security division, also the deputy head of the national security division. And yes, surprise, that is the same office that just lost the highest profile terrorism case of Trump's second term. They charged a guy with a suicide bombing at the Kabul airport that killed 13 American service members. You remember that? Well, it turns out, surprise, after losing all the top attorneys working on that case in that U.S. attorney's office, surprise, they were not able to get a conviction on that charge. Last week, we also saw Trump's DOJ abruptly drop felony charges against protesters they arrested in Illinois, protesters who were protesting against ICE. Trump's prosecutors dropped the charges, and we don't exactly know why, but they dropped the charges unexpectedly right after the judge in that case demanded to see the transcripts of what exactly those lawyers had said to the grand jury behind closed doors, in order to get those felony indictments in the first place. Is it possible that something bad was indicated in those transcripts they couldn't let the judge see? I don't know, but it cost them all those felony charges. They dropped them all. Even in the ballroom case, the ballroom, people suing to stop the stupid ballroom construction of what used to be the East Wing of the White House. Those plaintiffs have now told the judge that they believe Trump's DOJ lawyers lied to the court multiple times in that case about the ballroom. A federal judge in Rhode Island, we talked about this last week on the show, is also now pursuing a disciplinary referral against one of Trump's DOJ lawyers, for a disciplinary referral for misconduct, because that lawyer appears to have, say it with me now, lied to the court, which is something you are really, really, really not allowed to do. So we're gonna talk tonight on the show about the effort to try to fight back against the new Jim Crow. Trump's appointees on the Supreme Court voting to end the Voting Rights Act. Republicans all over the South moving with lightning speed to bring us back to the 19th century, to end all black representation in the states of the old Confederacy and anywhere else Republicans are in control. Their best trick is to make their actions seem permanent and irreversible and inevitable. The people's best trick is to push back nonviolently and relentlessly, and then watch them cave. They don't like a hard fight in the first place. When their hard fight has to involve lawyering, which it so often does, well, it turns out they're as good at that as they are at skincare advice and international diplomacy and aphrodisiacs you can buy on Instagram from the would-be Surgeon General.
Joining us, MS Now contributor, managing editor of The Bulwark, Sam Stein, MS Now political analyst and former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, Rick Stengel, and co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners, Henrietta Trace. Henrietta, let's talk about credit cards. What are credit cards?
Let's start with credit cards. The way to think about this, I think that's the easiest to understand, is that the average family spends $310 a week on groceries. That's how much more it now costs you to fill up your truck or your car. That's because of the war. So now you're out a whole week's worth of groceries, and that's why people are turning to credit cards. Savings rates are at 3-year lows. People are the most negative and pessimistic about their job prospects, their independent economic viability, as they have been since World War II. So people going to get credit cards is an indicator of a very anxious nation that's run through all of its savings and does not have the money it's costing to get through this war. And this is not a one-time event. This is every single week. Every time that you go to fill up, every time you go to get groceries, and it will continue to cascade. If you go to the doctor's office, your medical imaging costs more. If you need to get a new phone, the semiconductors cost more. All the fertilizer that are growing your food costs more. Every single piece of this continues to compound. And I think more problematic is the White House now signaling that they want to pass a gas tax suspension, which means they think prices are going to rise from here. Those are one-time off bets, and it's compounding.
Well, explain how the gas tax suspension is going to work.
So we have an 18.4. Yeah, we have an 18.4 cent gas tax, 24.4 cents for diesel. And the idea is you suspend the gas tax for maybe 90 days. That's what a couple of states around the country have done, Kentucky, Georgia, and a few others. And the idea is that you get that 18 cents shaved off the top of your gas. So if you're buying gas at $4.55, 56 cents, this will save you 18 cents on every gallon. That's for 90 days. So first, right off the bat, I know that that means that I think the straight and gas prices are going to be high for another 90 days. And the idea is that this is a one-time thing, but it's going to raid all of the highway trust fund, all the potholes and bridges and road repairs that we see. It's a huge compounding problem. It's very expensive, about $176 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And those are the figures that we're going to be dealing with. So the president is lending some support to this idea now, but there's a very long way to go. And again, it's 18 cents.
Oh, he needs Congress to get on board with it as well. I know I quoted Kevin Hassett. Let me just play Kevin Hassett. I think it's worth listening to him talk about it directly.
The consumer is really, really firing on all cylinders, just like the corporate sector you're seeing in the earnings reports. And they're doing that because they have so much more money in their pockets. In fact, I had the head of one of the big 5 banks in my office yesterday going through the credit card data. And just as Secretary Bessent said, credit card spending is through the roof. They're spending more on gasoline, but they're spending more on everything else, too.
Sam, it reminds me of the Scott Bessent line where he was talking about buying your 10th, 12th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th home. What's up with this White House?
A little tone deaf, to say the least. I thought I would rank the Bessent one a little bit even more tone deaf. Shaving off that 11th home as a way to, prepare for the costs going up is something that only a select few of us can consider. But Kevin Hassett, that's he does this time and again. He goes out there on TV and he paints this incredibly rosy but also incredibly detached picture of where the economy is. And he does it because he knows that someone is watching him on TV, and that person is Donald Trump. And yes, credit card spending is going up, but as we've just outlined, it's going up for the wrong reasons. Gas is more expensive. Cost of goods is more expensive. People have to pay for essential services, and so they're putting it on credit. That is not a sign of a healthy economy. It's a sign of an economy that is coming apart at the seams. And if, in fact, gas prices are not going to go down anytime soon, you can imagine that inflation is likely to get even worse because it is compounding. It goes into all these transportation costs. It goes into costs for a number of other goods as well. And so we are looking at a summer in which people are naturally going to be going on the road. People are going to be cooking out. You can see right there, ground beef. And the administration is looking for ways to chip at it. So there's two things that are happening here. One is they're painting an incredibly rosy picture with these types of cable news hits. And then secondarily is they're trying to find little ways to chip at the cost. So gas tax holiday is one of them. But the other thing that was kind of an interesting tell is that Trump is considering getting rid of some of the tariffs on beef, which is an admission. We should note that the tariffs were, in fact, responsible for raising prices in the first place. So they're nipping around the edges, and we'll see if it does any good. I think in the aggregate, it's only going to be a little bit of relief, and the bigger picture problems will persist.
Rick, why nip around the edges? Why not just roll back all the tariffs?
Well, you know, the truth is every president inherits his economy from his predecessor. The economy that Trump inherited was an economy where inflation was going down, GDP was growing up. If he had just decided, like, I'm just going to start taking credit for this a few months in, it would have looked good. What did he do? He shot himself in the foot with tariffs. He had major kind of terrible move in invading Iran, increasing oil prices, which has a multiplier effect on everything else. So he has single-handedly kind of destroyed a positive economy that he inherited, that he could have just actually, you know, taken credit for, and people would have been pretty happy. It's not a good situation. I mean, the other thing we didn't mention is that the national debt now is as high as it's been ever as a percentage of GDP since World War II, which is it's 100% of GDP, over multiple $1 trillion. So that also has an inflationary effect. All of these things have inflationary effects. And listening to, you know, that cabinet member, it's like, did you take Economics 101? Credit card debt has an inflationary effect on every other aspect of the economy.
Yeah, and the APR on credit cards is exorbitant. So if you miss one payment, you're paying a lot more for your bag of oranges than you would have been paying if you just were able to use your debit card or your ground beef. Sam, I thought Republicans were the ones that wanted to get a handle on the national debt.
Well, they do when there's a Democratic president, and that's time and time again what we see. So I was around during the Tea Party wave 2010. This was the rallying cry. And then subsequently they get into office, and during the Trump administration, debt went up. They don't cut back on spending. They do cut taxes. Those in combination drive up the debt. And look, I mean, there will be cuts here and there that they will propose. And I will give, I guess, if you're monomaniacally focused on that, you can say, well, they're cutting back on food stamps and Medicaid and all the things. But they did just embrace a $1.5 trillion defense budget, which is an exorbitant amount of money, greater than, I think it was like something like the next 8 countries combined in terms of their defense budget. So, you know, it's selective spending cuts, constant call for tax cuts. And so the calls for deficit reduction and debt reduction are pretty much basically when a Democrat is president.
Where does this money come from?
Well, and by the way, if you're letting go of taxes on gasoline, on beef, you're getting less money
so
from
where
taxes.
does the money come from?
Well, part of it is why the debt is at a higher level than it's ever been. I mean, the deficit that Trump is creating is going to be the highest deficit of any president ever. It's deficit spending. You're not getting the tax revenue. You're spending more than you're taking in. They're spending $1.50 for every dollar they're taking in.
Putin's losing the war.
Yeah.
I actually think the chances of a peace deal there are going up because Putin is flat out losing this war.
Right.
And then, obviously, Donald Trump, confusing Iran and Venezuela, thought this was going to be a cakewalk. And
by the way, it's not like everybody in foreign policy circles didn't warn him. This is not Venezuela. Don't go into Iran, Mr. President. This is not Venezuela.
We have an update on that.
No, and the lack
said
of
it every day here.
The lack of expertise and experience in the room, you know, that Israeli piece a few months ago, the Jonathan Swan piece with Maggie Haberman. Yeah. And what's stunning was the lack of anybody essentially or standing up and say, hey, there's like 26 differences here, and maybe our assumptions aren't right. So, right. Yeah, in both cases, these leaders made enormous bets. Yeah. Turned out to be deeply flawed.
Didn't work. And Michael, you know, we've been saying on the show, I guess Richard says it, and maybe he draws more attention, but we've been saying it on this show from the very beginning that if Donald Trump and his team didn't have such contempt for Zelensky, they would have realized that asymmetrical warfare had moved to the next stage. So big powers with great militaries, well, they can still be humbled by asymmetrical warfare.
Ukraine is the center of gravity for 21st century warfare, right? I mean, 80% of Russian casualties are being delivered by first-person view drones that the Ukrainians have pioneered.
How did the Pentagon miss that before they went into Iran?
The interesting thing, the Pentagon is not missing it. The CIA isn't missing it. Donald Trump.
Let me be more exact.
Right.
How did Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham miss what
There
the
you go.
entire intel agency and the entire Pentagon leadership knew.
You know, it's so funny. This guy, Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, who went to Kyiv originally to talk about technology and drone warfare, and then was told to deliver this ultimatum to Zelensky: you must sign on the line which is dotted to make a peace deal and forfeit Donbass and over 100,000 people. He's become more of an evangelist for Ukraine because he sees what they do. He's like, we need some of that. That's what the United States needs to learn how to do. And, you know, the Gulf Arab states, which have cut all kinds of bilateral deals with Ukraine, much to the chagrin of Donald Trump, they're saying, hey, you guys went to war with Iran. You couldn't protect us from these Shahed drones. Guess who can? Guess who's teaching us how to shoot them out of the sky? Ukraine, a country you want to forfeit and sacrifice to the altar of Vladimir Putin. It makes no sense.
And how bizarre there are Ukrainians all over the Gulf states right now, all over Saudi Arabia, all over UAE. Why? Because they want to win. Because they want to protect themselves, and the United States can't protect them right now. Ukraine has the technology to do it. You wrote a great piece in The Atlantic this weekend. I think it was on Friday. And you talked about Donald Trump that was very bored with this war and wanted to move on, which we all knew he would be. And we all thought that, you know, I was saying
2 weeks.
He had told me 2 weeks. It's going to be interesting 2 weeks. It's going to be 2 weeks. And then I remember saying, listen, there's no way this thing goes into May because he will get bored too quickly. He's going to want to move on and go on to Cuba and other things. He just can't. And we see why. Again, he can't leave that country with a nuclear deal that is even weaker than what he thought Barack Obama's deal was. He can't give them more money than Barack Obama gave. Remember the pallets of cash that Donald Trump and everybody else talked about? He can't be even more weaker. He can't leave with the Straits being owned by the Iranians the way it's owned by the Iranians now, even if they can make more money after the war on oil than before the war. He looks extraordinarily weak, so he can't leave unless he just wants to be seen as a weaker president than Jimmy Carter and George W. Bush in Iraq, the two presidents he constantly attacked for not getting good deals out of those countries.
Yeah, Trump even returned to the pallets of cash argument on Truth Social over the weekend. He's clearly trying to work through in real time how he can get out of this war. He's desperate to get out of it. He is indeed, as one senior advisor used the word bored. That's correct. But there's also this sense he's deeply frustrated and feels like he's boxed in. He doesn't know how to get out. You just mentioned all the reasons why, if he were to bail now, it would be a significant loss. And already, he and the United States appear so much weaker.
By the way, can we just underline for everybody? I'm sure everybody at the table will understand. If you lose Iraq, and we could argue about that because after the surge, you know, things got lined up pretty well at the very end. But if you lose Iraq, you don't destroy the world economy. Right. But as Dr. Brzezinski warned on Charlie Rose in 2012, if you go into Iran, then you set the world economy on fire. Why do I bring up Dr. Brzezinski? One, because I'm married to his daughter, and I think she'll be nicer to me if I do that. And two, he was saying what CIA analysts have been saying for 30 years, what people like Dr. Brzezinski have been saying for 30 years. Don't go into Iran. If you go into Iran, you're going to set the world economy on fire. And that's what's happening.
I spoke to some ex-intel and military officials for this piece, and they say, for decades, we have wargamed what a battle with Iran would look like. Move number one for Iran is to close the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
And yet, that's the first step.
This is as complex as this. If you punch Mike Tyson in the face, what happens?
He's going to punch you back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they knew where that punch was going to be. It was going to be a left hook straight across the strait.
That's what's happened here. And also Iran, which has done this before, is reveling in its ability to sort of humiliate an American president. And that is what's happening right now.
Holding him hostage.
They're holding him hostage. He desperately wants to move on other things. It is, whether it's Cuba, he understands the political pain here at home. Republicans are frantically telling the White House, look at gas prices, look at the cost, look at the polls. We're in real trouble. But Trump can't even get Iran to, agree to the next meeting. He rejected they sent over a one-page proposal. Iran countered. Trump late last night, after Iran made Washington wait a few days for the answer.
To humiliate.
Another tweak. Trump says last night, It's unacceptable.
So, Ed Luce, this has to be all too familiar to you, writing, actually, the biography of Dr. Brzezinski. And I must say, reading that biography again, you felt sort of the pain as an American who, talking about myself now, who went through that process where the Iranians, day after day, week after week, would string American presidents along. And they did it, of course, you know, to other presidents, too, only to humiliate them at the end. And it did it to Jimmy Carter all the way through his presidency and waited until Ronald Reagan was sworn in to let the hostages leave Iranian airspace. This is what Iranians do. They humiliate American presidents.
It is a specialism that they've been developing over many decades. And the fact that anybody could be surprised by that is extraordinary. This, for an Iranian, a militant, even more militant Iranian regime than we had a couple of months ago, even if it is divided allegedly between moderates and hardliners, is even more of a pleasure, is even more of a bragging right, and a justification for who they are and what they do, than the hostage crisis, I think. Because the hostage crisis, as you say, it ended at 1 minute past noon in January 1981. After Reagan had been sworn in, they released them all. And then that was it for a while. But what we're seeing today is the humiliation of the United States. And I'm not sure how Trump gets out of it. We keep talking about how impatient he is and bored he is, but he's no closer to an exit than he was in week one when we were already seeing the outlines of what is very plain to us today. So, yes, Iran is getting more than its pound of flesh. Its national pastime, or at least a regime pastime, is to trample on the stars and stripes.